There's little doubt that to some, waterproofing comes naturally. But for the rest of us, staying dry in the rain is well nigh impossible without at least an umbrella. It could be argued that, like our feathered friends, a car is naturally well waterproofed. But that is not entirely true. A car employs a wide range of different materials and techniques to help keep its interior compartments absolutely dry, even in the lightest summer rain, let alone the fiercest downpour. For water has the ability to seep through even the tiniest chink in any armour. A car body shell has many fixings, screw holes and cable entry points, each of which is a potential source of a water leak, and therefore needs to be effectively sealed. Within the design of most cars, there are a number of obvious lines of defence against water ingress, such as the weather strips around doors and windows, the windows themselves. Under the bonnet, drainage channels direct water away from critical areas and components, although this presumes that the car's second line of defence, the many grommets and seals, are firmly in place. Inevitably, there are occasions where these defences are found lacking. The consequences are, as in this case, an unhappy and even wetter customer. While the waterproofing on Ford cars is remarkably reliable, inevitably leaks will occasionally be reported. Among the most common cause is where an untrained, non-Ford mechanic has dislodged a critical grommet or seal, perhaps while routing some electrical wiring for a new accessory. The difficulty is to find that problem, for water doesn't always appear in a car close to the source of a leak. That's where this program can help you, the Ford technician, to quickly diagnose the source of any leak and then effect a satisfactory repair. The first step in diagnosing any water leak is to get from the customer as full and accurate a description of the complaint as possible, trying to determine where and in what circumstances the wetness shows up. To this end, the Customer Assistance Questionnaire has been developed. The customer can mark on the questionnaire exactly where the water leak appears.
Is it clean water or dirty?
He or she is asked whether the ingressing water is clean or dirty, which would suggest it had been splashed up from the road, a very useful clue to the leak's location. Another question is, does the leak occur when driving, whilst in the car wash, or when parked? And if the latter, when parked on level ground or at a particular inclination. This is an important consideration. If, for example, a vehicle is habitually parked on a steep slope, water from a leak at the rear of the car might run inside the body and appear in the front footwell. In general terms, the vehicle should be regarded as having 3 distinct areas for the purposes of leak detection, although it's not ruled out that a leak in one could show up in another. There's the passenger compartment front, the passenger compartment rear, and the luggage compartment or boot. You'll find that this division of a car into 3 distinct areas is reflected in a special publication that has been produced to help you with this work. The Guide to Water Leak Diagnosis and Repair, which you should always keep close at hand. In this program, we will, as the booklet does, point out the obvious and some of the more obscure places where water can seep, trickle, or even pour into a car. And in each case, we'll show you the correct diagnosis procedure. We'll show you how it's possible to find the exact source of a leak, using simple techniques allied to a logical approach, and in most cases, with the minimum of equipment. Incidentally, The techniques and procedures we'll cover don't necessarily apply to a particular model. The general principles are the same for any vehicle. Providing a customer is closely questioned and careful notes taken, their answers to the questionnaire will at least give you some idea where to start looking. This should avoid an assertion such as the windscreen is leaking because the front footwell is getting wet. This sort of thing should be treated very warily because, as we've already mentioned, there are several much more likely explanations. Perhaps surprisingly, you're recommended to use a simple garden spray to help track down the exact point of a water leak. With this, you can test every possible source of ingress one at a time, using a limited but sufficient amount of water to detect the smallest leak. The opposite methods of flooding every part of the car at once by putting it through a car wash or spraying it with a hosepipe is unnecessary and not recommended. When testing for a leak, it's important to start at the lowest point, in the area where the leak is suspected, and work upwards. This avoids masking a leak in one place while testing in another. In addition to spray testing, a visual examination of the condition of door seals, grommets, weather strips and drainage channels can also provide clues in leak detection. Having discovered a spot where water is getting in, the waterproofing must be made good, either by the application of a Ford-recommended sealant or perhaps by the renewal of weather strips. When the repair is complete, there's still one very important job to be done. To assist Ford in their analysis of water leaks that are discovered, a special reporting system has been developed. The exact location and cause of each leak must be entered on the job sheet, using one of a series of defect codes. These codes are all listed for you, either on a wall chart or in the claim coding manual, and they need to be recorded accurately. In particular, you need to record the code that relates to the water leak you've found, not all the areas you test as part of the diagnosis procedure. This information is fed back to Ford, where careful analysis of the information takes place. Those areas of the car which repeatedly cause concern are then investigated by the engineers so that either design modifications can be made or changes in the manufacturing and assembly process. But before moving on to discover in detail how you set about diagnosing water leaks, let's just look back on the main points of this first module. Body water leaks may occur in a number of different ways: through pin or burn holes in welds or through body seams, through skips in the sealer, past weather strips that may have been damaged, even gaskets and grommets that are incorrectly fitted. Diagnosis begins in service reception in the shape of the customer assistance questionnaire. And when you carry out your diagnosis, be guided by the technician's booklet that has been prepared. At the end of your job, don't forget to use the coding manual or wall chart to record your findings. In any job, these are of vital importance to Ford to ensure that while customers may suffer outside the car, inside they can be sure of being dry and comfortable. If for the purposes of water leak detection, a car is divided into three sections: the front and rear passenger compartment and the boot. Then leaks that appear in the front passenger compartments are frequently the most difficult to diagnose. Historically, wet carpets would have suggested a leaking windscreen. But with modern direct glaze windscreens, that is rarely the cause. Often, the condition of the carpet will provide some clue to the point of water entry. If the carpet is wet high up on the bulkhead, the leak may be from bulkhead seals or bulkhead to body seams. If the wetness is confined to the bottom of the footwell, it may be that the water is getting in past the door weather strip. But don't come to any hasty conclusions. There are other possibilities. Many would argue that successful diagnosis relies on a combination of skill, experience, and intuition. While those factors play a part, the important requirement is to follow the simple, logical procedure laid down in the diagnostic guide. And in this case, you begin by looking for the obvious, conducting a preliminary search immediately above the evidence of the leak. If nothing is immediately apparent, then your next step is to test all the possible areas where a leak might have occurred. Because water has a habit of running downhill and not uphill, you begin at the lowest point, and in this case that's within the door aperture. Possible sources of leaks within the door aperture are the door hinges, the checkstrap mountings, the courtesy light switches, and any cable entry points such as for radio speakers. What is important is that you don't go too far or cover too great an area with the spray gun before stopping to check if there is a leak. You might otherwise disguise the location of a leak. When operating the spray gun, play a constant stream of water over the areas being investigated, making sure that you move slowly enough to reproduce the leak should the fault be in that area. Your checks should be done slowly and methodically, giving any water time to run through any path it may be taking. If the door aperture reveals no leaks, then move on. This time to an examination of the bulkhead to floor pan seams and all the various grommets and seals that protect the many holes in the bulkhead. Again, move slowly and methodically along or around any potential leak source. Stop frequently to check, making sure you don't cover too great an area at any one time. Otherwise, if you find a leak, you'll have to retest to narrow down the area and locate the exact spot. When you do discover a leak, stop your testing immediately and repair it. To do this, dry the area thoroughly first, compressed air being the best way of achieving this. Then, in the case of pin or burn holes in the welds, or as in this case, sealer skips in the seams, repair the fault either with an approved metal sealer or caulking compound. Make sure that the material you use is thoroughly worked into the faulty area to completely seal it. Once you've discovered and repaired a fault, don't stop there. Continue testing all the possible areas where a leak might occur. As in this case, a leak may not come from just one fault. We've mentioned the cable entry points. They seem to be prime candidates for removal by those who don't know better. Once firmly back in place, they can do the job for which they're designed, notably to prevent water leaks. Water in a footwell or dampness of the carpet or trim may also indicate a leak past a door seal. To find out whether this is the case, you should again use the garden spray, remembering that water runs down, not up. Then stop to see whether you've found the leak. When you come to check the area tested, any leak should be immediately apparent, as in this case. But here, there's another pointer to that water leak. The door is hard to close, a condition known as hard slam, where the door is either flattening the weather strip or the strip has become distorted, so forming a crease which acts as a channel for water to trickle in over the seal. There could be a number of remedies, including replacing the weather strip or adjusting the door flange. If you adjust the flange, make sure no gap is left between the door and the weather strip, nor that the door crushes the weather strip, the hard slam condition. There must be an even, complete contact all the way round the weather strip. If you decide to renew the weather strip because it's damaged, you must loop the strip into the aperture, having first satisfied yourself that the flange is not distorted and that the weather strip carrier is tightly closed. Make sure it's pressed firmly into the corners of the door frame first, and then push the carrier firmly onto the flange all the way round. This approach will avoid the weather strip pulling out of the corners and also prevent slack or stretching. Once in position, the joint should be carefully sealed by placing caulking compound under the weather strip. What you should never do is cut the weather strip to make it fit. If it's too long and overlaps at this point, it means you've not looped it correctly around the aperture flange. With the new weather strip in position, check carefully from inside the car to make sure that there aren't any obvious gaps between the weather strip and the door, nor that the weather strip is being crushed too tightly by the door. Another way in which water can appear in the front footwells is through the doors themselves. All Ford doors are designated wet doors, which means that they allow water to enter past the window glass and out through the door drain holes. For this reason, a plastic sheet is fitted inside the door trim to prevent water leaking into the interior. This is often mistaken for packaging, with the result that it's ruined or torn should repairs have to be carried out to a door lock or window regulator. And the result is a very wet footwell. In checking to make sure that sheet is undamaged and tightly sealed, use the spray gun to force water past the window glass. Make sure the window is fully closed for this test and allow time for any leak to show up by passing twice along the bottom of the window with the spray gun. Then check the bottom of the door at the point where the trim joins the door to see if there's any water appearing. If there is, you'll have to remove the trim to find the fault. And the sort of fault you'll find could be a small tear or even a wrinkle in the plastic sheet. If the sheet is merely wrinkled, you may be able to reposition it, but if it's torn, you'll have to replace it. The important point here is that the sheet must be secured with double-sided adhesive tape, which is stuck first to the door in continuous strips, running all the way round the door. The tape itself must be fitted smoothly to the door with no wrinkles, and the ends of each strip must overlap at least one other strip, for example on corners, to be sure there are no gaps through which water could pass. And when fitting the plastic sheet, make sure it sticks smoothly into place with no wrinkles and a firm bond all the way round. Yet another source of leaks into the front footwell could be the radio-aerial grommet. A useful guide here is to try and see whether the water that has entered the footwell is dirty, perhaps through staining of the carpet and trim. This could indicate that water has been thrown up from the road and entered past this seal. As can be seen, there are many areas other than the windscreen where water may enter the car and appear in the front footwell, and it's worth reminding ourselves of what they are. Leaks can occur through the body to bulkhead and floor pan seams. Through the bulkhead seals, past the weather strips, past the plastic sheet behind the door trim, the courtesy light switch, fixing points and cable entries in the door aperture area, and the radio-aerial grommet. To trace a leak, first make a visual check inside the car. If nothing is obvious, then follow the established procedures for diagnosing water leaks by spray testing in the relevant areas.